Now there are lots of people. Like I had a bike trailer, with kids in it. I was always like, "Oh, I see you. I saw you riding your bike the other," and I'm like, "I haven't been in town for a month." And they're like, "Oh, there's other people riding too now." We have a slow roll, which is not really my thing, but it's great. Other people do that, People are just getting more in the habit. And I think it's a slow, gradual thing, but I do think it is gradually moving in that direction. We're getting to the sort of tipping point of people spending too much time indoors on computers just for their livelihoods. And people are realizing, wait, I really need to just walk more. I need to just get my blood moving. I don't have to do a marathon, but I need to just touch grass and be outside some.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Active Towns channel. My name is John Simmerman, and that is Sam Pearson, the Healthy Communities Program Manager from the Pennsylvania Downtown Center and the WalkWorks program. We're going to be talking a little bit about the initiatives that she is heading up and leading there in Pennsylvania. But before we do that, I just want to say, hey, thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Hey, super easy to do. Here on YouTube, just click on the join button right down below, or navigate over to activetowns.org and click on the support tab at the top of the page. Okay, let's get right to it with Sam. Sam, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. Welcome.
It's great to be here, John. I'm honored. Feel a little bit like a post turtle here. People know what that is.
What is a post turtle?
It is someone who got somewhere that cannot get themselves off and did not get themselves there.
Up on the post, a post turtle.
Yes,
there
post
you go.
Turtle. So yeah. I hope I can distinguish myself and show that I actually climbed up here.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. But to get us started, I love having my guests just say a few words about who you are. So who the heck is Sam?
So I am currently I work for the Pennsylvania Downtown Center. My name is Samantha Pearson, and the Pennsylvania Downtown Center is a statewide nonprofit in the state of Pennsylvania focused on community revitalization using the Main Street approach. I specifically work on a contract with our state Department of Health called WalkWorks, where we complement that community revitalization work with very dedicated focus to active transportation, planning, education, and technical assistance. So my role right now is sort of the active transportation statewide guru. I assist in the big cities where they've already got a lot going on, and I collaborate with the great organizations in those areas. And then I sort of bring a dog and pony show, e-bike and balance bike show, wheelchairs, white cane show to different communities around the state as in tandem with funding for communities to help communities develop active transportation plans.
Wow, fantastic. Now, what's your backstory? How the heck did you get engaged and involved and interested in doing all things active towns and active transportation?
Well, I am my educational background is in architecture and planning. I have both undergraduate and graduate degrees in architecture. I've worked in architecture and planning. I also have a certificate in American urbanism. That's actually from University of Virginia, and I know other people have mocked that a little bit as a certificate in American townism, but that is my job. I now work on American townism.
Yeah, interesting. And how about your backstory? Where did you grow up and all that kind of sort of stuff?
I am originally from Miami, Florida.
Oh, you are? Wow.
Yeah. I was born next to Biscayne Bay, and I grew up there until I went off to college. In fact, biking frequently for transportation. In fact, I grew up in a car light household.
Okay.
A lot of time, at the time, it was actually an unincorporated Dade. We lived in Coconut Grove for a while, then an unincorporated Dade. It's now called Pinecrest neighborhood, Kendall. greater Miami-Dade County. And it's not the most walkable or bikeable place. It's hot. There's not great infrastructure, but we biked a lot. We including uh, to school very early on, including crossing what was, Route 1, a 6-lane highway. I mean, I crossed with my mom, but, you know, so I've basically been walking for and biking for transportation my entire life in many places around the world and the US. Right. This is what my crossing place looks like now. It did not have the elevated. There were grade level train tracks where the elevated metro rail line is now. There were certainly no bike lanes. um,
Yeah, and this is
yeah.
the bike lanes that we see right there. That's part of the underline.
Yep.
Yeah,
So I
interesting.
used to ride that by bike once it was in place when I was in my 20s, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fascinating, fascinating. Yeah, and gosh, who do I know that lives right in that area? Victor Dover. Do you know Victor?
I don't know Victor, but I do have some. My father is also an architect who, for many years, they're no longer in Miami, but he sort of knew the architecture scene, and so I had more connections actually to other people like Plater Zyberk, Liz Plater Zyberk, and Andre Strommani. Yeah, not super direct, but I did.
Sure, sure.
Um, yeah, I connected with them periodically over the years.
Yeah, yeah. Fascinating stuff. And, when we look back at, kind of what got us, engaged and started, and you and I are going to talk a little bit about some of the programs that you're currently working on. And I know that you're really passionate about, creating safer environments for kids. And I get the sense that this photo kind of highlights why that's of interest to you.
Indeed. I was, I said I grew up crossing Route 1 in Miami on foot and by bike. I was sort of a classic, uh, you know, bold, in fact, probably crazy cyclist. I would ride pretty much anywhere. I rode all sorts of places, Miami, Boston, Baltimore, and then I had kids. and and it became much more fraught. Uh, it's just much more complicated. Uh, we currently live in a small town in central Pennsylvania, and for years, I mean, when we moved here, I've been pushing to make it more bikeable and walkable. We had There was basically a recreation authority that I joined the board of shortly after we arrived here about 20 years ago that was working towards developing a rail trail. This is not that trail, actually, but it's a further extension of the rail line in the far west end of our county where this picture was taken. But I worked on the design and was on the board of the Rec Authority during the whole design process for the creation of the Buffalo Valley Rail Trail, it's not a long distance trail. It's basically a 9-mile trail, but it does connect communities, a couple different communities which are not connected by transit, unfortunately, uh, from the small town of Lewisburg to the small town of Mifflinburg. And in fact, if you take that trail, you can then connect off into on gravel roads to the state forest, Bald Eagle State Forest. We now have some major races that come to our area, like gravel races, because we have this little rail trail that provides that link.
Yeah, and that kind of harkens back to the whole point of why many of these corridors existed, is it connected village to village, town to town, and you mentioned there's not good transit in between there servicing that, and yeah, if you can activate these abandoned rail corridors and bring them along into activity assets and ensure that there's good connectivity to the communities. It could also help in terms of revitalization of said communities and, bringing some life into some of these downtown areas. Hey, for the benefit of the listening only audience, why don't you describe what we're looking at here?
Sure. Okay, so this is a picture of me almost 20 years ago on a bike with my two children. My daughter, she's like 2.5, is on a front seat behind the handlebars on my bike, and my son, who was about 5 at the time, is on a tag-along attached to the back of the bike. Uh, it was our, we went through many iterations of carrying kids on bikes. My son did ride a bike on his own at that point, at that age, but, for a longer trip, we would use it. We were I realized they only gave you things on wheels, but we were in creeks, on hiking trails, and rolling around on scooters all over the place.
And what I love about this great thing is this sort of harkens back to the original scooters. Now when we say scooter in the active transportation and urbanism world, we almost always are referring to the dockless e-scooters and scooter share programs. We're looking at little razors here zipping around on a ball court. What's really interesting about this, and we might end up talking about this, is that when these became like a craze, the razors and the other types of small wheel scooters, stand-up scooters that the kids would push along with, it really helped them to develop balancing skills and the proprioceptive skills. And I feel like it's one of the reasons why, if they originally start off really, really young, zipping around on one of these, it's a really easy transition then to go from this to a balance bike, and from a balance bike to a regular bike. You probably
Often when we
experienced that.
do yeah, when we do balance bike rodeos, often kids in Central PA will be like, "Oh, I use training wheels," and even my kids had training wheels, although I was really interested in this picture when I was looking through. I have a strap attached to it so I can drag her, I can pull her if needed. I was like, "I don't even remember doing that, but it totally makes sense." Yeah. But yeah, you're right with the scooters, it's definitely, both my kids were riding. This is Hazel, at 4, riding without training wheels already. We also had balance bikes, like, they weren't purpose built, but we actually converted an old bike to a balance bike, which was a great toy. It was in the mix with our ride-on toys. We had scooters, we had balance bikes, we had regular bikes. It depended what you wanted at a given time. You could already ride a pedal bike, and you might want to, in fact, they called it the motorcycle. I do not know why, but they called the balance bike their motorcycle. Uh, and so that's how I learned how to ride. Uh, I did not have training wheels. We had a teeny, teeny, tiny bike, and I was able to sit on it with my feet on the ground, and I just coasted in circles on our deck in Miami. I distinctly remember this. Um, and then when I got to try a friend's bike that had training wheels. It was this big, tall, purple bike with training wheels. It was terrifying because it was so tippy. And so I basically, I'm like, "Oh, running bikes are a thing, balance bikes are a thing. I'm there. I'm all over
Yeah,
it."
yeah, yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about those programs and the balance bike programs and bike ed. But since we're looking at some photos from the past, why don't you describe what we're looking at here?
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's not labeled or anything, but this is what we call River Road Holiday here in Lewisburg. I think this might have been our second one back probably in 2011. So it's a rural open streets event. So we're a rural small town. And so we closed River Road, which the river is just on the other side of the railroad tracks, the Susquehanna River. And this was south of town. We closed River Road at that time, about 3/4 of a mile of the road to through traffic for cars, open it up for people walking and biking. And it was glorious, right? We've done that. We've done it almost every year in fact, some years twice a year ever since. It was basically, we started it right before the rail trail was finished, and we were really just really anxious for some space that people could just ride and walk and push strollers freely. And it really has been, it's a beloved event, but it's also very complicated. Like, it's, the permitting is very involved and the signage is very involved. We now get donated signage, like $3,000 worth of, detour signage, which is nuts, you know? Um, so we're hoping there should be one coming up in October of this year on River Road north of town. This one was on River Road south.
Fascinating, fascinating. And what's really interesting too about this, and again for the listening audience, listening only audience, we're looking at this visual of a whole bunch of people rolling and strolling and skating on this roadway, this rural roadway, and it's fairly wide lanes and double yellow down the middle. And you can see the sign, speed limit sign here, 40 miles per hour. So, I mean, this is, it's not uncommon that you see, a 40 mile per hour. But until you like realize and focus on what the fatality rate would be like if a person walking or biking is hit by a motor vehicle at 40 miles per hour, it's almost a sure likelihood of serious injury for sure and fatality most likely. I think it's in upwards of 85% likelihood of fatality at that speed. And of course, people don't drive the speed limit, they drive over the speed limit, so etc. But what's really fascinating about this and the pent-up demand is there's no provisions for people walking and biking in this neighborhood.
Yep. This is just on the edge of our town, so it's actually into the next township, the adjacent township. In both directions, you sort of leave the borough, that municipal boundary. So the sidewalks stop a couple blocks prior to this, and then you have a still functioning railroad track on the left. You have a functioning farm on the right and farmhouse. You can see the driveway to the farmhouse on the right. And you can see there's drainage structures between the, on either side of the road. There have been various feasibility studies looking at whether we can do rail with trail, heading south. There's definitely interest. We have a little stretch of rail with trail in town that we have put in the past few years. An extension of our rail trail, the original 9 miles, now has a little piece in town and has about 2 blocks that's rail with trail. And the trail authority is interested. The rail company, the rail operator, is interested because it could open up avenues to additional grant funding that could help fund maintenance that they need to do anyway. So it's a long game though, right? Like, I came in, we did our first rail trail that had been in the works before I arrived here in 2003. And I sort of, people realized that I was coming in with a design background and construction background. I sort of knew about this. And so people directed me towards the rec authority and, suggested I join the board, and asked me to sort of take this on. But it took years, and we're not done. We have one of the major trail gaps in the state is getting from our 9 mile trail into our downtown. We have to go across Route 15 in Lewisburg, and my children, who I show in those pictures, they are now in their 20s. Like, one is just, into there. My son, when we were first doing the trail, getting the trail in, he's like, when am I going to be able to cross Route 15 on the trail? And at the time I was like, hopefully 2019. We're not there yet. And that was for him. He was 9 years old, and that was going to be 8 years later. And he was like, I'm going to be in college. Well, he graduated from college, and we still don't have it, but we finally have cleared certain hurdles at the state level. We, for years, have been running up against a state DOT restriction that would not allow us to install what was essentially a mid-block crossing on this rural highway. even though it was the obvious solution. Where the railroad used to cross, we basically want to be able to hit some buttons. I don't think I gave you a lot of information about this because this is sort of my previous life. Um, but uh, yeah, we've got renderings, we've got, and we now have transportation alternative set aside funding coming to the county trail authority, and the municipalities are on board, the adjacent municipalities, to work on this. And in fact, I'm now on uh, our borough council for the borough side of things, the downtown side. So I'm able to, when they come to us and say, "Oh, well, we're going to have to, make some investments in order to help make this happen," and it's like, let's go. When do we start?
Yeah, I hear you. So interestingly, taking a look at this particular image, and again on the right, we mentioned on the left we've got the active rail line. On the right, it looks like we've got the utility lines and the utility corridor that's running parallel to the street here, and we see that it is 40 miles per hour. Is this a state-owned street, or is this a county?
Good question. And in fact, I should totally know this, but off the top of my head, I don't. I believe this is state road. Again, because I'm less focused on the borough these days. Um, Actually, no, this is not a state road. I don't know why, because River Road north of town is a state road, and we have to do the road closure there. We have to submit a TE 300, permit for a road closure, complete with our traffic detour plan. For the south, we don't have that, but there are more notifications we have to do because there are more abutting houses and properties, and so we've had some more Uh, challenges actually doing it down there, and it doesn't connect us directly to our sidewalk network.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And the reason why that's a fascinating thing to understand. And what's the distance to the next village or town?
going south, it's a long way.
It's a long way. Okay.
Yeah, going south is a long way. Going north, we are 6 miles from the town of Milton. And to be honest, we would probably do that on the other side of the river, but we'd like to have connections on both sides, right? We don't need just one route. We need many routes. We need a network. There are initiatives I'm involved in, and other people are working on to hopefully get across the river. I don't think I gave you, we have renderings. My dad, also an architect I mentioned, did of the rail trail crossing the railroad bridge across Susquehanna River, which it's a non-navigable river, but it's still 1,200 feet wide.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you and I had the chance to meet in person a couple years ago when I delivered a keynote address at the Pennsylvania Greenways and Trails Summit, which is coming up again this fall. Are you going to be able to make it?
Oh yeah, I will be there. They do the statewide summit every other year, and then they do regional ones in between. So we were in Scranton, I believe,
Yes,
when you came,
that is
and
correct. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was great to have you there, and you got to see some of the trails. I believe we rode on the Lackawanna Heritage Trail. Uh, yep, from Carbondale, or to Carbondale, from north of Carbondale. And then we sort of had to get bused because we'd still need the connection. There's on-road connections, but it's very challenging from Carbondale into Scranton. Yeah, Scranton is all of Pennsylvania is sort of an opportunity waiting to happen.
Yeah. And again, this year is going to be September 21st through the 23rd there in Harrisburg. Looks like it's going to be fun.
Yes, there's going to be a tour of the Capital Area Greenbelt. I'm participating on a walking tour of downtown where we're going to look at active transportation infrastructure and historic elements. So that's going to be really good too.
Okay, a couple more photos from memory lane. Walk us through what we're looking at here.
Sure. This is the Buffalo Valley Rail Trail basically the spring after it finally went in. It was finished in November of 2011. So, and what you're looking at is a gravel trail heading off into the distance. There's um, a minor driveway crossing with yield signs for the trail, people on the trail, kids in the foreground, people walking in the background, some railings, a bridge you can see in the distance, and a lot of vegetation. Um, the two kids in the foreground are my own, so this is them adventures again, riding bikes. And this is just sort of an iconic image of this trail. It is very heavily used for a rural trail, even though it doesn't really connect much, right? Like, it is, that said, it does connect some employment opportunities, especially since we have our county actually has a large Mennonite presence, horse and buggy Mennonite presence. So there are definitely people who commute or use this as their highway.
Ah, interesting. Interesting.
Although
And
you
I've
can't ride buggies on it, much to their chagrin.
Right, right. And this image was fascinating to me. Why don't you walk us through this one?
Sure. So this is another leafy green image in the countryside, this time in the Netherlands. A couple years ago, right before the pandemic, my family and I got to do a 5-day bike tour as part of a longer trip over in Europe. And we rode from Haarlem to Utrecht, basically, 30-mile routes each day. I believe this was leaving Leiden in the morning. And so you're in a countryside going on it's basically a double track lane. Uh, each of the lanes at this point were paved, but it's still just a single lane road, and the center of the road is not paved at all. There is a very uh, weedy canal off to the right, and then, like I said, vegetation, and we're heading into countryside. So you have my two kids, now teenagers, in this picture, and actually I'm in the foreground. I believe my husband took this picture.
Yeah. Fabulous. And so it's great you had that opportunity and the family had that opportunity to get over to the Netherlands and dive deep into that. And what I absolutely cherish about that experience is doing just that, is being able to ride from city to city, town to town, and almost always having, high quality, comfortable off-street network of pathways that can get you, from location to location. It's sort of like if we were to have a vision, for connecting communities throughout Pennsylvania, rural North America, it would be that is find a way to be able to cobble together, the connectivity between the cities and the villages, et cetera. And that's kind of what we're doing with these abandoned railway corridors and abandoned or not abandoned, but railway utility corridors, the underline, putting just space that we are being creative about turning into activity assets.
It is challenging. I like to say I drive an incredible amount in order to make it safer to walk and bike, because I do travel around the state, whether for events, or we have grantees that are working on active transportation plans every year, around 10 different municipalities. And so I have to make sure I visit them so that I can give them useful input as their consultants develop their plans. And as I'm traveling around, I always have this split screen in my head of what would I do in an ideal world with this particular road. My least favorite are the 55-mile-an-hour roads with people's house driveways leading out to them. You know, yeah. Although many of them are so wide, you could potentially redevelop them as like having a frontage lane potentially, or just narrowing the lanes, reallocating the cross section to give some of the shoulder instead to a continuous cycle track down one side, two-way cycle track down one side with crossings as needed. We do have a lot of high-speed two-lane roads in Pennsylvania, some of them with big shoulders that could be reallocated, but we also have a lot of high-speed truck traffic on them. And I do know that for these municipal officials, especially township supervisors in these small, remote, rural townships, they are terrified of having a crash that obstructs the road. So they don't just need the space or see themselves as needing the space for the vehicles to pass and to get through. They see it as they need to also have space to get through if there's a crash in a disabled vehicle, which from my standpoint, I'm like, let's make the road safer, fewer crashes, and, and let's make them safer in part by making them narrower. But that's it's a really tall order to start to communicate that. There are so many different ways of seeing the world. Like you said, you go to the Netherlands. I mean, I'd already done bike infrastructure focused towards elsewhere. So I knew I wasn't really dropping the scales from my eyes. I was just gonna revel in it. But all it takes is getting a little bit of that exposure, and then suddenly you can start having these conversations. But the people who are in charge of running our systems, of developing and maintaining, designing, maintaining, building, all of that, our transportation system, are not plugged into that. So it becomes a really tall order. I'm also involved in some, like, there's one thing called the Interagency Active Transportation Working Group. And so has multiple state agencies that are trying to incorporate the value and the importance of active transportation into their own agency policies. It has great promise, but it's also really challenging. We had one meeting 2 months ago with, we have a couple representatives from the DOT as part of it, but we brought in some additional people who have different roles. And they explained, all our great plans for having trainings for state employees about active transportation and inviting them to learn about it and then figure out how to apply it to what they do, that there are literally structural bureaucratic barriers that make it almost impossible to have DOT employees participate. And it's just like, what? That's the whole point. So,
Yeah.
So
All
I
right. Well,
want to get there,
yeah.
but it's hard.
Yeah. And everything is so interconnected and interlaced, from a public health perspective to transportation to land use planning. All of this stuff is interweaved and intertwined. And so I'm not surprised that you're striving to try to have this interagency sort of connectivity to be able to have these discussions because of the fact that you don't have to go very far, pardon the pun, before you're like, oh, we should be partnering with these organizations and agencies and institutions. So, yeah.
I mean, I meet with people. So my official title for my job is Healthy Communities Program Manager. And then I work on the WalkWorks program on active transportation. So that's sort of a mouthful, lots of different things pulling together. I have met other people with my same title from other states like Arizona and different places. And they're like, oh, do you work with the State Department of Transportation? And I'm like, sort of. We're funded
Sort of.
by the State Department of Health.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
where the funding for this is coming from.
Yeah. Fabulous. Okay, we made that transition. We are ready to talk a little bit about WalkWorks. So walk us through.
Sure. So WalkWorks is I've mentioned we provide funding to municipalities for the development of active transportation plans. And we're really, we will fund updates to active transportation plans, but the reality is most places just need to get started with active transportation planning. We have funding through our State Department of Health, and that is sort of backing up, comes from a Preventive Health and Health Services block grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. If alarm bells are not going off yet, they should be. So this is a little bit challenging, but To be honest, originally the program as a pilot about 10 years ago started under the state physical activity and nutrition program. And Pennsylvania is still a quote ambassador as part of that CDC program, but we don't even get funding from SPAN anymore. So we shifted to the Preventive Health and Health Services Block Grant, and now we're trying to further diversify our funding. We also and all along have gotten a little bit of matching funds from our Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. So that's another state agency. And then we have brought in this year some diabetes prevention funding and also something called our Public Health Infrastructure grant, which is related to our state health improvement plan. But still, it's very health oriented. The whole point is to make people healthier. And so we want to both make them healthier by reducing injuries and deaths and crashes. And we also want to make them healthier by providing opportunities for that great incidental physical activity through getting yourself from point A to point B that reduces a whole host of chronic conditions, whether it's, the sort of heart disease, stroke, those sort of top line diabetes, being overweight or having obesity, or, those things, all the way through mental health improvements. There is literally a litany. In fact, I give a presentation about the benefits of active transportation, and I have one slide where I have 130 things scroll by at once. And I'm like, okay, those are all the benefits, right?
Yeah. What's interesting too, and you know this about me, is my background, of course, is in public health and in healthcare cost containment and disease prevention strategies. And one of the things that I learned after I transitioned away from actively working in that field and focusing more on the intersection of the built environment and health and well-being is that it really sunk in for me that talking about these things it doesn't really resonate so much. It resonates to a level of understanding and acceptance, but it doesn't necessarily translate directly into societal inspiration and motivation. What really ends up, I think, making a difference is that when we can get all of these benefits, and it's just tremendous number of benefits, like you said, hundreds of things that are the benefits, by coupling that with a few other things from a behavior perspective is it convenient? Is it comfortable? Is it safe? Is it something where my peers and my friends are doing it? In other words, a cultural thing where it's like everybody's doing it. The whole reason I named Active Towns what I did was I had done an experiment back in 20, not experiment, but a survey and a group of focus interviews back in 2012, interviewing people who lived extremely active lifestyles and talking about why they chose to move where they did. And they kept saying, we chose to move here, Boulder, Colorado. We chose to move here, Bend, Oregon. We chose to move here, Austin, Texas, because there was just this sense of activity there. It was an active community. It was an active city. It was an active towns. Active Towns, by the way, was the only URL still available, so I snagged it. And that's how Active Towns got named. But people said they were self-selecting active communities because that's what they wanted to do. And so one of the things that I try to, advise people on is, there's a whole bunch of things and benefits, co-benefits that come from active transportation and active living, including, as we're talking about, improved health and well-being, from a physical perspective, an emotional perspective, and a mental health perspective. And there's also the benefits of, climate and, potential congestion, traffic mitigation, enhanced economics, and all of that. But if you lead with any one thing in terms of that, it's like,
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
People, I mean, it's almost, to be honest, I started like a sustainability nonprofit, uh, all volunteer group in like the mid 2000s, the aughts. And it was actually too broad based, right? We would talk about local food, local economy, local energy. We'd talk about green building. And people they just wanted to talk about their one thing, right? They're like, well, I'm interested in safely getting to school, or I'm interested in, the local grass-fed meat area. And so it was almost like, I think that's similar with active transportation. We solve too many problems, and this is actually a problem because it doesn't crystallize things until you've made this realization. And so that's where we try to do presentations. We participate in coalitions with other entities like statewide organizations. We've for a couple of years been working with a group that has just named itself the Coalition for Active Mobility in Pennsylvania, CAMP. And so we're, uh, you know, these groups from around the state that are very focused on active mobility. We're looking for ways that we can work together to promote uh, that this bigger picture, right? This economic benefit. It includes our organization, so the Pennsylvania Downtown Center, that sort of economic development. It also includes 10,000 Friends of Pennsylvania, which is our land use, and planning uh, uh, proponent. And then it includes, Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, Bike Pittsburgh, these different, and then transit entities. So like people, not individual transit operators, but Mobilify of Southwest PA, for example, that is promoting making sure people can get the longer distances or have something to connect to, right? Like where I am in this rural area, people, there is no way to get to and from here, without a motor vehicle. It's incredibly limited.
That's kind of the point I'm making too here is that I talk about this a lot, and you know this. This is a part of my keynote presentation slide deck. Is I see the world through activity assets, and we were looking earlier at these wonderful trails and pathways, and I'm labeling those activity assets. These are the hardware activity assets. You can put a pin in a map and say, hey, over here we have this delightful rail trail. Over here we have a wonderful partnership in a rail with trail. Fantastic. We've got that. And over here down in Miami, we've got the underline, which is, activating previously unused or underutilized space, even car parking, and making that happen. That's the hardware. The software is all of these encouragement and awareness and education activities that need to really activate and keep it going and really make it easier, take down the friction points, because we are talking about a pretty major cultural shift from a drive everywhere for everything mentality. And that evolved over just about 100 years. I mean, hasn't been that long, but it is a challenge. And so that's what I love about the types of work that you are working on, and many of your peers around the world is working on these incentive types of programs and awareness types of programs and education types of program and empowering folks. And if you can empower a specific group, if you can empower the younger Sam, the mom, the parents, huge. Talk a little bit about this program.
Sure. So we have something called a micro fleet, where we have a bunch of different micro mobility devices that we can cart around. One of the biggest parts of that is our balance bike fleet. We have balance bikes, which are what you're showing right now is an image of a flyer that we have that we developed along with the Early Childhood Mobility Coalition crew, which is nationwide people working on early childhood mobility, as it sounds like. So you have a picture of a kid riding a balance bike in winter through a puddle on a wooden balance bike. It's fun, with a green background. And the
That
title
that
of the
would that
yeah,
would totally be me.
yes, yes, no, that you can understand looking at it why kids think that my kids thought it was a motorcycle, right? Um, so the title is Babies on Bikes. The Early Childhood Mobility Coalition says, let's roll. So we put together this intro. It's an article that was actually published on a Penn State. Penn State has an international education platform, Better Kid Care, and so we got this article published on there, and so it gives basic intro to what balance bikes are, why they're useful, and our push is we want more people to know that they exist, what they are. We want people to also be comfortable deploying them, like not being like, I can't teach a kid to ride. I don't know, like a balance bike will teach the kid itself, on its own, um, even if you don't have a lot of facility with that. But we're also helping people gain facility with that. And we want more kids to have access to balance bikes where not every family has to buy yet another fairly expensive ride-on toy. So we're looking to see if we can get more of these into settings at daycares, summer camps, schools, where children will have access to use of a balance bike, and then be able to graduate, sort of get the initial feeling of that bike joy that we know about, and the family and the child can sort of understand this as an avenue to future transportation and self confidence.
Yeah, yeah. And again, we had mentioned it earlier. I mean, to me, there's absolutely no better way to teach a child how to ride than a balance bike. I mean, it just I felt like it was a natural transition, seeing the number of kids. And I was teaching bike education programs for fourth graders in Hawaii over a decade ago. And I could just tell, the kids that maybe they didn't know how to ride a bike yet by fourth grade, but the ones that were skateboarders or zipping around on razors, scooters, etc., they picked it up right away. They get the glide, boom, we've got it. It's great. I do see that we have a website here, a resource, the kidswalkbike.com website. And so, folks, if you're interested in learning a little bit more, pop on over to kidswalkbike.com, and there's some pretty cool stuff out on the website there.
Yeah, that includes a big focus on balance bikes themselves, their benefits, traffic gardens, whether it's pop-up or installed traffic gardens, like built places where you can learn to ride, learn about rules of the road, and bike buses, which of course you've covered as well. So just giving kids, the autonomy or the option to use cycling for something meaningful in their life, right? Getting to and from school.
And and this is huge. I mean, because this is again what we're talking about. We've got to have both the hardware and the software. We've got to have the hardware of building out the safe and inviting environment within our communities, whether they're large cities or small, communities, rural communities. It has to be able to save. It has to be safe to be able to get to our meaningful destinations, whether it's the corner store or school or the park, wherever.
And so that's one of the things. We do have a lot of resources being developed all the time in different states, different organizations. One of the things I do is I respond to need, right? Like people, come to me and they're like, oh, we're looking for information about bike share, or, we're looking, and so I can try to marry them with other resources that I know about, try to bring those in. At the same time, there are also like currently insurmountable problems. Like people will be like, what do we do about X? And we really want to have parking protected bike lanes in this particular stretch, and it's like, well, in Pennsylvania they're illegal.
No, I thought you guys were going to get that fixed.
We've been working on that for like 8 years. It has there are multiple bills that have gone through into the legislature. they'll only to, finally get passed, but with a poison pill in them. And so then the governor has to, veto it. It is agonizing. So officially, according to the Pennsylvania Motor Vehicle Code, cars have to be parked within 12 inches of the curb. And so therefore, you can't just move the cars away from the curb and then put this other thing there. The workaround there are a couple workarounds. Number one is you can build another curb, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Right. But that's much more expensive than one of the advantages of the parking protected bike lane is the relative ease of implementation. And suddenly you have a protected bike lane protected by these big hunks of metal. And so if you also have to build a curb, which also entails a lot of drainage and, re-engineering of the road more than paint does, or flex posts, it's just a huge challenge. It puts it out of reach for a lot of communities. We also did have we did have like a brief there was a moratorium where Philadelphia was allowed to install, I think, I can't remember if it was 10 or 15 miles of protected bike lanes, and they did. We now have the data, huge improvements, right? In safety and for everyone, not just for the people on the bikes, huge increases in number of people riding. But that's one of the things that we can't get a waiver to do more. Some other communities, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and southern Pennsylvania between Philadelphia and Harrisburg they have a couple of parking protected bike lanes. They just sort of did, and asked for forgiveness afterwards. It's a real challenge. We just updated the state design manual for the DOT, DM2, Pub 13 for PennDOT, and we just gave comments on the bicycle chapter, and it was agonizing because it has now included a lot of new stuff from the NACTO and AASHTO updated bicycle design guides. But it's just like there were pages where it was just like, really what we need here is a parking protected bike lane. Like that's clearly what would address what was in the design manual. Just it's hard. At least we get to give comments on those documents.
I want to show you a quick video that I shot earlier this year in Pennsylvania, and this could actually be part of how Pittsburgh was able to do this. So this is clearly a parking protected bike lane, but you'll see that they strategically used some creative curbs here. I wonder if this is part of the copacetic or the workaround, or I don't know. Yeah.
So this is challenging, and I would say that because the design manual hadn't been updated, it was a little bit of a vague area. The cities they literally are classified differently in our state municipal code. Philadelphia is a class by itself, and Pittsburgh are a class by themselves. So that is probably not a state road, number one. And number
so it's just on state roads.
Well, no. So that's just it. PennDOT claims that if you're not allowed to do it on a state road, if you start doing it on a local road, they will pull funding from you. So that has a chilling effect for any of the smaller places, right, that want to do these things.
Yeah.
I think I also shared with you like a video that we did last year about tactical urbanism in Pennsylvania. And that it's a similar situation there where we know that tactical urbanism, we know that all sorts of pop-up, bike lanes, pop-up, bump outs, painted bump outs, narrowing streets, doing a pop-up chicane, all sorts of things like that could be an amazing resource for a community, but it is almost impossible to do it in Pennsylvania. You can get yourself in a situation where you're asking, you're talking to the city, and the city's like, yes, we'll do this. And then the city talks to the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and they're like, well, let's check with the PennDOT district. And the PennDOT district is like, no, you can't do it. And then you're like, okay, well, what if I go through PennDOT? can I apply? Is there a permit I can fill out to do this? And they're like, you're filling out the wrong permit. Like if you're doing a road closure permit, that permit doesn't apply to this. And you'll literally have one person telling you to fill out the permit and another person from the same agency telling you not to fill out that permit that is not relevant. In other words, I don't know, I'm old enough to remember the movie Brazil, right? The Terry Gilliam movie from the 80s, which was about a true, like literally pathological bureaucracy, nightmarish.
Right,
That
right.
that is
Yeah.
sometimes what it feels like. We're sort of caught in this situation where you're not allowed to do things. You're required to keep things unsafe, right? It's more important to preserve the unsafe status quo than to try something new. Just so frustrating.
It is. And you alluded to earlier, that even funding is in question right now. And I think to close us out, we should probably just kind of address a little bit of the elephant in the room, which is my perspective is always that active towns and what we're trying to do is pretty much apolitical, and it's something that doesn't matter whether you're on the right or the left of the political spectrum. You should want to have a viable, healthy, thriving community, versus the opposite of those things. You shouldn't want that. I mean, I think everybody, would agree that, oh no, that's good. I want a safe environment for my children and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren. I want, my mom to be able to get to meaningful destinations under her own power if that's what she chooses to do. But it does tend to divulge. What's the current situation there in the state? I mean, do you get the sense that the work that you're doing is resonating across political lines in the political spectrum, or does it immediately, get into culture war issues?
It can very quickly get into culture wars. People like the idea of trails, but in my county, we have a county commissioner who's like, oh, I only like trails that already exist. In other words,
Well,
they don't want to invest.
wouldn't you agree though that trails are much more likely to be supported by both sides, quote unquote? It's sad that there's really only both sides, two sides. We won't even get into that, but from my perspective, it's usually much easier for off-street networks of trails and pathways, et cetera. You do get resistance in specific areas, but in general, they're popular, by the vast majority of people. But when it comes to on-road, yeah, yes.
They're popular if they already exist, and they also like that you have to drive to them, right? Because that makes it so that the wrong people don't come. When we try to say, can we have the transit connect to the trails? And in fact, Luzerne County has this amazing Routes to Trails for Luzerne County Transit Authority, Routes to Trails map. It shows how you can get from Wilkes-Barre by bus to all sorts of trails in the area. But that's very much a rare thing. It was the result of a walking college project from the America Walks Walking College program. So I like they also don't like trails. They're like, how are you going to maintain it? I'm like, how do we maintain the roads? Right? Like we invest a huge amount in our roads, and can we just understand that this is also transportation? Similarly, PennDOT will build you a sidewalk, but only if you are then going to take on its maintenance, which is basically a backdoor veto. They can depend on the local area for the most part to reject it. So trails have they have the potential, but they're scared of trails that actually do connect things, right? Like trails that come into town or leave town. Um, Transit is another one where we're really trying to push. We have a statewide coalition, Transit for All PA, and we are really pushing the reality that we have 9 non-drivers all over the state in every district. 30% of Pennsylvanians do not have a driver's license, and we're really doing a huge amount of outreach to across the state. In fact, I don't know if I could point you to there on this page, but I think under updates there's a page that there's a post that talks about small systems. There are more than 30 fixed route transit operators in the state of Pennsylvania that that operate outside of Philly and Pittsburgh. And, it is not something that people are really aware of. I think, this one, if you click on this one, small systems are in crisis too. I think if you scroll down, it might show a map of the state that shows that we have Transit for All PA supporters all over the state. I'm not positive it's on there. I'm not sure where it is. But sorry, I can't find it just off the top of my head. But we have transit supporters. We have people who are supporting our push for adequate funding, not just stopgap funding, which is what's being proposed currently in our overdue. It might be voted on today and then voted on in a bad way. State budget. We're pushing to have real funding that comes from the transportation related sources. On the one hand, the governor has asked for a reallocation of additional allocation from the state sales tax. We also want to get a fee on Uber and Lyft rides across the state, update the fees on car leases and on car rentals, and feel that those will go together to make a package that would support reestablishment of transit levels from 2019 in our big cities, and actually increasing service outside of the cities because it wasn't adequate in 2019. So that's our platform. That's what we're pushing for. By the time this airs, probably something will have passed, and I doubt it will be what we want. So we're continuing to work. We're pushing for more because we really see this, and this is our challenge. We're trying to do a lot of outreach in our rural areas, which are more conservative, trying to make the case that this is relevant, whether it's for your mother who doesn't drive or may not drive soon, for your kids, whether it's for you when you drive to or near a city and don't want the million people a day who currently ride transit to be disgorged onto the streets to drive more cars, right? Like, even if you never ride transit, having transit is valuable. And so that's really what we're working on. And I literally later today have a meeting. We're involved with some national initiatives on transit messaging with the Transit Center and the Opportunity Agenda. So learning about ways of pushing for not the people who are most opposed, but for the people who could be persuaded to support this, and hopefully then also, sort of nudge those lawmakers in that direction. Because to be honest, it's the rural lawmakers that tend to be the ones who are most likely to be opposed, but we must have their support. There is no way to pass meaningful transit funding without working across the aisle with people from both parties. And in fact, now in Philly, all parties, because we do have multiple parties, Working Families Party is really making a showing there. So, we are on that right now, right? We are trying to make the case. We're trying to have those conversations. I know, living in the center of the state, I do have more occasion, more history talking to people who, just they don't visit Philly. They are afraid of Philly, right? Like, and there's also just sort of, there are very vast cultural differences, but at the same time, there are things we can agree on and we can discuss. And so keeping our kids safe, trying to make sure that people have, access to food, talking about veterans who need, shared ride, because shared ride is also threatened. The PennDOT just released a report saying that our shared ride funding source is not up to the challenge either. So all of these things are a challenge in a state like Pennsylvania, which has we're big, like large area, large population, huge number of roads, and really inefficient networks currently. So we're ultimately trying to push people on let's make an efficient, effective, safe network.
Yeah.
Who's going to
Well,
object to
speaking
that?
of efficient and safe networks, harkening back to what we were talking about with the Netherlands of connecting village to village, town to town, with the pathways and trails, a sub theme to that summit that we attended 2 years ago was really looking at that economic benefit to many of these rural environments of having the connectivity, the safe access to a pathway and trail network, and the trail towns, and the other TOD. Instead of transit oriented development, it's trail oriented development. Do you get the sense that those rural politicians and those supporters, they understand that economic benefit and they want some of that? Because your state has some of the most amazing network of trails that have been in for decades. And the cities, the towns, the communities, the villages that happen to be along those corridors benefit from huge amounts of local access, improved health and well-being, etc., but also the economic benefit of literally thousands, tens of thousands of, especially this time of year, summertime, of people visiting from all other states to go out and ride those networks.
That's a really good question. And so the obvious one is the Gap Trail, the Great Allegheny Passage, right, which connects
Absolutely,
from
yeah.
Pittsburgh all the way down to Maryland, and then on the C&O Canal Trail all the
I
way to
just
DC.
watched a YouTube video this weekend of a gal and her father doing it, and she had tens of thousands of people subscribing to her channel and watching. Yeah.
So I will say that some of the small communities in those areas, some are latching on and they're like, oh, we need to connect to it, right? And so there's lots of efforts like in communities that are like 10, 20 miles away trying to get trails that will connect over to the Gap. I will say a lot of so some of the communities along the Gap Trail have taken advantage of it and are really understanding. There's a new economic impact analysis that was done last year that shows just astounding amounts of money coming into the region through this. And so some of the communities are like, oh yeah, we got to get a piece of this. But some of them, there's a lot of a cultural divide where people are like, oh yeah, that's the trail for those people. We don't do that, right? And there is, I mean, I am not from Pennsylvania originally, right? I moved here about 20 years ago, and one of the things that drove me bonkers when I've said that a lot today, but when I first got here was what I see as sort of an insider experience culture. People aren't as invested in sort of communal assets because they have their own river lot or they have their own, cabin in the woods somewhere. And so they're more about that sort of private asset and oh well, I go to the river, I do this, or I go, ride my ATV over here, and less about providing an asset that is sort of accessible and visible. Even when we have accessible assets, they're often impossible to find. Like it's like a secret. It's top secret. You have to know a person who knows a person, right? And they'll tell you how to get to the trail, right? Because we couldn't possibly put up signs or have maps. So I think it's a cultural thing, but I think you are right that the existence of these things is starting to catch on. We now have some new divisions in our Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The Pennsylvania Downtown Center has a program called Nature-Based Placemaking, where we're trying to tie, natural assets and economic development together and sort of guide communities to think in those terms. But that culture element that you just mentioned, like having an an attitude or an aptitude or a tendency to think, oh, I could do that. That is probably the biggest barrier. We need more people to just be like, oh, yeah, I go to the trail. I walk my dog there. I run sometimes. Sometimes I ride a bike. Oh, I don't have a bike. I can borrow a bike. I know where to get a bike or bike share or something like that. I don't know how to ride. Well, there's learn to ride classes for grown-ups. Like we really need that culture to build up. And it is depressing to say it on the one hand, but also hopeful. Like I moved here 20 years ago, and there was me and one old guy who was always riding around on our bikes. And now there are lots of people. Like I had a bike trailer, with kids in it. I was always like, "Oh, I see you. I saw you riding your bike the other," and I'm like, "I haven't been in town for a month." And they're like, "Oh, there's other people riding too now." We have a slow roll, which is not really my thing, but it's great. Other people do that. People are just getting more in the habit. And I think it's a slow, gradual thing, but I do think it is gradually moving in that direction. We're getting to the sort of tipping point of people spending too much time indoors on computers just for their livelihoods. And people are realizing, wait, I really need to just walk more. I need to just get my blood moving. I don't have to do a marathon, but I need to just touch grass and be outside some.
Yeah. Well, I can't think of a better place to bring this to a close. So well said. Sam Pearson, thank you so much for joining me on the Active Towns podcast. This has been so much fun catching up with you.
It's been great, John. I don't know if we had sort of a big picture, but I love talking about this stuff, and it's really good to hear from someone with a like-minded health perspective on it too.
Yay. Well, we will be sure to catch up once again. Please be sure to reach out if you do have any major updates. We'll be sure to promote that out on LinkedIn. I know you and I are connected out there. Is that typically the best place professionally for folks to catch you?
Sure. Yeah, LinkedIn is great. I'm just on there as Samantha
There
Pearson.
She is. Boom.
Yeah, there are a number of us, but I'm the one in central Pennsylvania.
That's right. Very good. Again, thank you so much, Sam.
Great. Thanks, John.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Sam Pearson. And if you did, please, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and share it with a friend. And if you haven't done so already, be honored to have you subscribe to the channel. Just click on that subscription button down below and ring that notifications bell. And again, if you're enjoying this content here on the Active Towns channel, please consider supporting my efforts by becoming an Active Towns ambassador. Again, super easy to do. Just click on the join button right here on YouTube. You can also leave a YouTube super thanks for this particular video, or navigate over to activetowns.org, click on the support tab at the top of the page, and there's several different options, including becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons do get early and ad-free access and some bonus material, and you can also leave a donation to the nonprofit or buy me a coffee. Again, every little bit adds up and is very much appreciated. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time, this is John signing off by wishing you much activity, health, and happiness. Cheers. And again, just want to send a huge thank you to all my Active Towns ambassadors supporting the channel financially via YouTube memberships, YouTube super thanks, as well as making contributions to the nonprofit and joining my Patreon. Every little bit adds up and is very much appreciated. Thank you all so much.